I'm Sounds Goodman, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a song called Castle by my band Admella. So I'll go through the production and the tones of everything, but I'll also maybe go a bit more in depth on my thought process and writing process and how this song came about. Okay, so I'm going to try this thing where I reach out and ask for help instead of trying to do everything myself all the time and feeling bad for asking people to help me. So this is this new thing I'm experimenting with. So, 1. Do you want to be an actor? We need volunteers at the moment because we've blown our budget on buying all the gear to make the film clip. Do you want to be an extra? Do you want to act? Can you dance? Can you do anything cool like that? And you want to help us out? That would be so awesome. If any of that sounds good to you, you should hit me up and we'll talk about it. 2. Do you have access, or know anyone has access, to cool locations? Do you have access to an old factory or a decrepit old home or something like that? If you have any cool locations that would be good for filming, please let me know. 3. Buy my stuff. Please. I'm selling these 2 Tonalux EQs. They're really rare and hard to get in Australia at the moment. And they're made by the guy who used to make the API stuff. They're really, really great. I just don't need them right now as I'm focusing on filming stuff. So I've got a pair and I've got this lunchbox that they're in. So if you want the lunchbox as well, you can buy that off me. If you need EQs or a lunchbox, hit me up and we'll talk. This has been Reaching Out with Tom Wilson. So this was on Admella's EP Tragic, which came out earlier this year, I think. And I just remember this song in particular came together really, really fast. As in, I did 3 or 4 mix passes, and it was done, and I was really happy with it. And even when I listen to it now, I feel good about it. Whereas I know the other songs on the EP, probably 30 or so mix passes, re-recording drums, re-recording guitars, just trying a bunch of stuff. And when I listen to them now, I'm still not completely happy with them. So I think that comes down to a few things. I think this is a better song than the other songs that are on the EP. So there's less finessing that I have to do to get it to the standard where I like it. Another part of it was prep, which is something I'm not very good at and I don't find enjoyable. I kind of just like to sit down and do everything when inspiration strikes. Whereas with Castle, there was a lot of planning, and I actually did a full demo of the song before I did this final version, like full length. It was sloppier in the performances and the tones, of course, but I had mixed it down roughly. So I guess when it came to mixing this, I kind of knew what it was that I was going to be doing, roughly. And I did things like I auditioned a couple of different snare drums on this track. Like I just played along to it with my Pearl snare, played along to it with my Ludwig snare, both tuned to the same note, and went back and listened to decide which one sounds better. I did that with both my kick drums, my 26 and my 22. I played just the kick drum throughout the song, came back and processed both of them to a finish point and listened to which one was going to be better, and then chose it. And I did that for a lot of things, and then came back with all my chosen decisions and then recorded it. So I also did that for the guitar. My brother has he hoards guitar pedals, basically. So he has all the overdrive pedals, like all the ones that everybody talks about. And so I recorded just a DI of one of the riffs in this song and run that same recording through all the different distortion pedals into the same amp on the same settings. And it was like 12 different pedals. So it was like the Ibanez Tube Screamer, the Maxon Tube Screamer, the Boss yellow pedal, the Boss orange pedal, the Angry Charlie, all those different ones. And what I found when I was A-Bing all of them is that pretty much for like a higher gain tone like this song, all of the pedals sounded really similar, and it wouldn't have mattered which one I used out of all of them, until we tried this Mesa Boogie. I think it's called Mesa Boogie. Okay, it was the Mesa Boogie. Wow, I've forgotten already. I just looked it up. It was the Mesa Boogie Grid Slammer, and that one sounded really good and interesting and different to the other ones. It had a nicer top end, like it seemed to accentuate the top end a bit more, and the mid-range was probably less honky and a bit cooler, and it just had a cool distinctive character to it. So I ended up using that one. We A-B'd 2 different cabs, again with the same tone, the Mesa Boogie oversized cab and my orange cabinet, and we found that the orange cabinet actually had more low mids and potentially more bass and a better presence area. The Mesa had less bass and a harsher presence area. So I ended up going with the orange. And with the recording of the guitar, there's one guitar that's the Marshall tone. And I remember having the master volume on the amp all the way up to 3 o'clock. So really, really loud. I remember wearing my in-ear monitors, which are molded, so they block out a bunch of sound, while I was tracking the guitar, and I still couldn't hear what was going on the song in my in-ears, so I had earmuffs over my molded in-ears just to be able to hear what I was playing, because I was in a small bedroom recording the amp, and the amp was pretty much right next to me, so I had the amp extremely loud. And then the other guitar I planned on reamping, which was the Stratocaster guitar with a combo type amp, but I found the guitar from the demo, which was just a sloppy writing take of the song into an amp sim, sounded really, really good. And there's a few parts throughout the song, which we'll get to later, where I'm just reacting to the vocals and doing a few sloppy kind of little things, and that's because it's kind of like the first time I played along to it on the guitar, and that take I just felt had a lot of cool like emotion and excitement to it as well. So one guitar is the Marshall and the other guitar is just an amp sim. The drums I just recorded in a kitchen, like a small kitchen, as opposed to the other songs on the record are recorded in a nice big wooden room. The guitar was in a small bedroom. The vocals were recorded in that same small bedroom. So my idea with the production of this song in particular, but the whole record, was I came up with this thing in my head that I wanted invisible production. So that means to me that it wasn't overly stylized. You're kind of just hearing the song and not the production. You're not getting distracted by, this massive, cannon drum sound or like anything like that. But that can be cool, but it also kind of takes away from the song. And surprisingly, it's really, really hard to do this thing that I've got in my head called invisible production. So it's kind of like where nothing is distracting, you're just hearing the song, and everything just sounds normal and right. So I didn't want to have like this overly stylized thing. I wanted something that sounded realistic and what I call naturalistic, or my version of naturalistic. So I first came up with this concept on a record I did with Stiff Nips. It's their latest record. I can't remember what it's called. It might be called Windings. It's on Spotify. You should check it out. But that is the same type of thing where the production is pretty much invisible. Again, that doesn't mean that it sounds bad. It's just not distracting and it's natural. It just sounds how I think it should without any bells or whistles. It's not like fancy effects going on. So that's where I first started coming up with that. Before that, I really liked, like old Motley Crue where the snare drum sounded like a cannon and the kick was huge and beefy and really scoop sounding, and a lot of delay and cool fancy effects on the vocals, but that sound can be a bit distracting. I think you're more listening to the production than you are listening to the song. And it's not as timeless sounding as something that is just kind of natural sounding. That can be timeless. It could be from any era. A lot of new stuff has got a lot of cool, fancy, clever effects on it and stuff, but that kind of timestamps it to whatever decade or era you're in. So the production on this song is very simple. There's not much going on in terms of instruments. There's 2 guitars. One of them is a lead and one of them is a rhythm, and they're just panned either way. It's not like there's 2 rhythms and 1 lead in the center. The lead is panned right or something, and the rhythm is panned left, and that's it for guitars. There's a bass. There's some pretty simple drums. And there's a bit of vocal layering, like, there's some harmonies and stuff like that. And then there's a piano and a pad and a synth, I think. So I'm going to get into the session now. Excuse me if I'm really slow with Pro Tools. I don't remember how to use it. I've been using Reaper recently, and I don't remember what I'm doing here. And god damn it, I hate Pro Tools so much. Just to make this video and get it so I could screen capture and get the audio to come into the recording and all this stuff took me like 2 days to set up, and Pro Tools wouldn't open and a bunch of stuff didn't work, and god damn it, I'm so glad I don't use this anymore. So I'm going to play you a little bit of the song so you know what you're in for here.
I wish I could say what I need to say. Instead, I'm half the world away. And even when I'm in the same room, I couldn't be further from you. Sat with the ticking clock. Every second is a moment lost. Oh, I think too much. If you're listening and you thought this song's about you, then it's not. I say too much. I wish I could say what I need to say.
So there you go. That's Castle by Admella. So let's start with guitar for something different. I think last time I spent like an hour at the beginning on drums, and if you don't like drums, that's probably really boring. So let's start with the guitars. So we've got Marshall on the right side with my Jericho guitar with a humbucker in it, and then a Stratocaster on the left side with just the normal Strat pickups in it, going through an amp sim. And those together sound like this. So as you can hear, both guitars are playing different parts. One's playing more of a higher lead thing and the other one's just playing pretty much straight power chords. But there's a few little cool moments where they both do different lead parts and stuff like that. especially in the bridge. As I said, that strat is just from the demo, and it was the first time I was playing along to it, and the vocals were there. I was just jamming along and having a great time, and I just was reacting to the vocals and did a couple of little leady parts, and I ended up leaving them in. Yeah, so that Strat guitar is playing what I call holiday chords. So I first learnt these chords when I was younger, listening to Green Day, the song Holiday, where it's like you play the first and the third, but the third's really high up, like on the B string, and you're playing the first on the A string, and you're playing it like that. So that is what the Strat is doing pretty much the entire song, through the bridge particularly. Where the Marshall amp is playing an octave lower, playing just power chords. I kind of tried to go for like a classic Marshall-y slash guitar tone, where you're just playing hard, digged in picking on a Marshall amp with a humbucker, and I'm happy with those guitar tones. And I don't think there's a bunch of processing. I haven't really looked at this session, so I could be wrong. But let's pull up the Strat and see what's going on here. The amp is this S-Gear amp that used to come in the Slate Digital bundle thing that I've got, but it's not in there for some reason anymore. So when I opened this session, the guitar tone was gone, so I just had to get a free trial of this amp. But it's this Wayfarer amp, which sounds really cool. It kind of sounds like a combo, like a Mesa combo type amp. And I'm using a ribbon mic on it, which makes it really, really dark. So that's why the treble is all the way up, because yeah, that ribbon mic is really, really dark. Cool, so let's look at the processing. Alright, so this EQ is just boosting a little bit of low end, like a bell at 100 Hertz, just to give it a bit more chunk. And then see, yeah, here, so 15K. So 15K is turned all the way up. I can't see the 10 dB. Because yeah, the guitar tone is just so dark. So if I turn this off, you'll be able to hear how dark that guitar tone is. Yeah, so it needed that. But instead of going for a different mic that has more brightness, and not having to do this, I found I like the mid-range character of this microphone. I found the top end, even when I boosted it this much, to sound really smooth. So that's why I opted out for this mic rather than a different mic, is you have to do more to it, but in the end it just sounded better. And then this virtual drive. Which isn't really doing anything, you'd just be adding some harmonics, turning it down a little bit there, and then let's have a look. Okay, so boosting a lot more low end there, it mustn't have had much low end. Yep, so it needed that, and then yeah, I remember all the high end that this mic picked up of that amp was just this range here that was really harsh, so I had to pull that out quite a bit. So if I take that out, you'll hear sort of how harsh it is there because of how much treble I'm boosting. So it sounds a lot nicer with that done there. And then this Q10, I'm just pulling out a resonance there. That won't really sound like much, it must have just been annoying me. And this is something that I was doing a lot at that time, is just using a lot of tape and clipping stuff to make it sound brighter and more immediate. And this J37 tape is really good for that. We'll try and hear it on and off. So that actually makes quite a big difference. That sounds a lot better with that on, a lot brighter. And then, yeah, so I've got this, just compressing it a little bit to give it that chunk and attack. Just a little bit. I really like that on rock guitar tones. I think with the Marshall amp, I have a Hairball Audio 1176, and I think I did this setting on the way in on the recording. So it probably won't have this plug-in on the Marshall amp, but it's just doing this much. So you mainly hear it when I do like a stop, and then it has time for the needle to retract, and then you hit another thing, and then it kind of like pops back up, and you just hear that punch of air on the start of a new chord, just to give it a bit more aggressiveness. Notching out that treble area, there must have been a bad resonance in there. And my Strat is set up still really poorly. I haven't changed the strings on it for ages, and I know there's just a lot of buzziness and bad sounds going on, which I have to count for by doing this kind of thing a lot. Sometimes I do this on the DI before it hits the amp as well, because once the amp picks it up, you're kind of screwed. So that needed to happen. That's very annoying sounding. And then just some more. Now this looks more like my type of EQ. So this is boosting some more low end here. Just that rumbly, cabby low end, and then it must have been. Actually, let's just turn this EQ off. Sounds really good with that back on. So it's notching out some annoying sounding areas there of the guitar amp, and then generally just once that area is flattened back out, there's no spikes, peaks and valleys, I'm boosting that area back up uniformly there. And then just doing, this is basically like a high shelf. That ribbon mic just has such a steep roll off that I've had to add that back in. And I really like that really airy sound on a guitar amp, like up in that. I know a lot of people roll it off. I like that 10K and stuff. It just makes a guitar amp sound really nice to me. So I'll always do that kind of stuff if it's not in there. So you can hear as I turned those high ones off, it actually sounded harsher. Somehow just having that extra extended top end makes that harsh mid top end sound less bad and less noticeable. So it just sounds more expensive and more finished with that on there. So I think that's the extent of the Strat. So let's have a listen to, let's go to a different part of the song and have a listen to the Marshall amp. Sounds like this. So that is just a Marshall JCM 800 turned up really, really, really loud with the Messer, whatever it was, the tread plate, grid slammer pedal, and an SM57 on it. That's it, just an SM57. So that type of amp with that kind of setup always needs a lot of EQ. A Marshall and a 57 just will have a lot of nasty stuff going on. So if I turn all this processing off, you should be able to hear it. So that's how it sounds coming in, and it's not very attractive. I have the SM57 right up right in front of the speaker cone. And I know a lot of people would move it off to the side of the cone to get less of that harshness. But again, what's happening when you do that is the mid-range isn't as clear or as good when you go off to the side. Yeah, the top end's not as nasty, but the awesome part of the tone isn't as good. So I'd rather have the mid-range sound really good and then have this nasty top end that I can fix afterwards. Even though it's no more work processing afterwards, I find that I end up with a much better result if I do it this way. So just straight in the center of the cone. Alright, so let's look at what I did here. So again, because it's a 57, you need to boost a bit of bottom end. Back in. Yep, so that was necessary there. And then here is just me trying to tidy up this this area here that's a bit ratty and all over the place. If I turn this off, you'll be able to see all these peaks and valleys there. So you can see there's a gap here, and then there's some really like pointy frequencies around here, and it doesn't sound very nice or balanced. You turn those back on. And it's much nicer. This stuff isn't really adding anything to the note or the tone, but it's necessary to have it there just to have it balanced with the other instruments in the song. Okay, so that's the first EQ. Let's have a look at this second EQ. So the second EQ is, I think what happened here is I was listening to the amp while I was playing it at a much lower volume, and I had the treble sounding right to my ears, but once I turned the amp up really loud to record, the treble actually kind of backs off a bit and it sounds a bit softer, so I kind of missed the mark on the treble, just because how much changes when you turn it up loud. So this is me just trying to find the treble area of the amp and boost it up a little bit more. And I find that treble area on a Marshall amp is around 1.5. It's there that you can still hear the note, but it's got that nice bitey thing. And this is just a resonance that I'm pulling out. That's not very interesting to look at. Okay. And then I've got this API EQ on it, boosting some 300. Yeah, I guess I just kind of wanted the guitar to be a bit less scooped and a bit fuller in that you know, that low mid area that a lot of rock or metal guitar tones, they'll scoop that out, but I just liked that in there. You might be able to hear it if I turn it on and off. Yeah, I feel like I can hear that. It just gets a bit wider and fuller sounding down there. And then, so I'll turn this off and on so you can hear it. So that just makes it sound a bit nicer, a bit more finished, a bit more hi-fi. So that's both the guitars. Now both the guitars are bussed to this guitar bus here, where I have just a little more processing on both the guitars as a whole. I must have been mixing it, and I always balance the left and the right guitar to each other so they have the same amount of top end and bottom end, especially because I'm always using different guitars on either side and different amps, so it's important that they're both the same amount of brightness and low end. So once I noticed the guitar was too whatever I thought it was, maybe too dark, instead of going and, you know, doing it on each guitar, I might as well do it on the guitar bus at this point. So yeah, a bit more treble, that 1.5K, which is the treble area on these amps, and then a bit more 10K. So I'll turn this off and on so you can hear it. That's a huge part of the sound. I was really loving these API EQs at the time. And I actually, at this time, I had bought a 550B API EQ. But because I was recording the guitar amp right next to me and so loud that I couldn't hear it, I didn't really want to mess with EQing it on the way in. I wanted to do it on the plug-in. And it sounds just as good in my opinion, the plug-in to the hardware. It was fine. I freaked out at the time, but it worked out well. And then just a little more low end boost. And a bit more of that wide guitar sound. And I did roll off the top just a little bit there at 15k, but you're still getting all this nice, 10, 12k there. Yeah, cool. So that's it for the guitars there. Except for this guitar solo here. So that guitar solo is from the demo as well, which is why it's an amp sim with my Strat guitar. I did try recreating this with my Marshall. So this is an unprocessed version of it recorded with my Marshall, which I didn't end up using because the one from the demo was just better. So yeah, it's not a very good take, but I could immediately tell that it just didn't sound as cool as this one here. And part of it has to do with, this was an improv thing, just reacting to the song, and you can tell I'm really digging in, and it's got a lot of sort of emotional character to it, and it just sounded better. So this is that same S-Gear plugin. With the ribbon mic again, and I'm going to say it's probably the same. Yeah, it's just copied across the same processing, but it's got a bit of delay on it, so it's got like a slapback and a quarter note thing there. Yeah, besides that, it's the same processing. So that's it for guitars. So let's have a look at this piano. This song starts with the piano, just the piano, and it's just this Pro Tools Mini Grand being played on a little MIDI keyboard, but just going through this Pro Tools Mini Grand, which is really good. I can't use this in Reaper now, but a lot of people say it's really unrealistic sounding, which it probably is, but it's just got a nice poppy sound to it. Let's just have a listen to the piano. Alright, so processing wise, we've got this Neve drive and then a bit of distortion here. I'll turn this on and off. It probably won't make a huge difference. It's just because it's so fake sounding, I wanted to add some of these harmonics and grit to it to make it sound a bit more real. So yeah, it just shaves the attacks off a little bit and kind of lengthens a little bit, but doesn't do a lot. I could have got away without using that. Easy. And then I've got this API EQ. So it is rather dark, so I boosted 12 dB of 7K as a shelf. I'll turn that on and off. So that's completely necessary there. And just a bit of EQ here. I must have felt like this 2K area wasn't quite biting through enough there with the guitars and stuff, because this piano plays throughout the whole song. So you can actually see there's like a pretty drastic roll off from 1K onwards, so it's just helping it a little bit. It's not massive, it's only 1 dB, but it's a really wide bell. So, and then this tape, again trying to help it sound a bit more real. makes it a bit more brighter, and then I think this is just a kind of slappy delay. Pretty subtle there, but just makes it sound a bit more like Elton John or something. So I've split that up into another channel, so when it comes in with the band, I think it's all the same processing. Yes, but rather than automating the volume, I just wanted it on a different channel so that I could just turn the channel volume up. So this piano here that comes in later is the same sound, but it's just that. So there's a couple of other virtual instruments here. Let's see. When the first chorus comes in, which doesn't have any drums or anything yet, it's just piano and vocal. This pad comes in, which is off Expand, which is just a free plugin that comes with Pro Tools. It's really cheesy. A lot of people hate it, but there's a lot of cool sounds on there. It is cheesy, but I think it really helped this part. Let's have a listen to how that sounds. So it is really cheesy and fake sounding, but it just makes that chorus sound epic. Like I really like, it sounds really emotional, and I don't know, I just really like that. So let's listen to that with the piano. So that was kind of necessary. Just, you don't really hear it, you kind of just feel it get a bit spacier there. Now this thing here, this pulsing pad, you really hear this, and I don't think this is one of the plugins that's meant to be on this. I don't have anymore, so it might not sound exactly the way it does on the recording, but it's just this pulsing pad doing a melody. So it just kind of makes this part sound more like Linkin Park or something. I'll show you with all that stuff on.
Instead, I'm half the world away.
And this part kind of needed something with a bit of movement, because the piano is just holding the chords and the singing is really slow, and there's these big gaps of just like kind of silence or ambient chords. So just having something that kind of moves along and fills in the gaps, I thought was a good thing.
I wish I could say what I need to say.
See, with it off, it's a little bit boring.
I wish I could say what.
Kind of gives your ear something to listen to in those gaps there. And then I've got this kick, which had just come from like a dubstep pack or something I got ages ago. And I've just filtered the crap out of it so that it's just like this low, subtle low pulse going through there.
I wish I could say what I need to say.
And you hear when I turned it off there, it kind of like, the part just didn't feel anchored or rooted. It just felt kind of a bit all over the place. So I'll turn it off and on again.
I wish I could say what I need to say. Instead, I'm half.
So it's subtle, but it really helps that part build and move along. And that is it for the virtual instruments. Like, nothing else happens there. So now let's go to the drums. So as I said, I was auditioning, I auditioned different kicks and different snares for this before I recorded it to know, you know, what was going to sound better, which is something I don't normally like to do. I don't like to get super technical and finicky with stuff. I just like to sit down and play it and have it done. It's more about the song for me than the other stuff, although like I'm, you know, clearly obsessed with mixing, but it's the engineering side I don't really have a lot of fun with, like setting stuff up. So here would be me experimenting with my 24-inch Mapex kick with the same mic setup as what I ended up using, just a different bass drum. So this is the tone that I auditioned, and it looks like I processed it all the way to completion just to see what it would sound like against the song. And that's an awesome kick tone. I really like that. But when I compared it to my 26-inch, I just found that my 26-inch kick had more character to it, and because it's such a simple song and simplistic parts, it was actually adding something to the song. Whereas this is a bit more of a metal kick, metal sounding kick, where it's like clicky and punchy and stuff like that, which is great, but it just didn't really fit the song as well. The kick sound that we ended up with sounded like this. So that's the kick sound it ended up with. It's just a bit more, it's a bit softer sounding, but it's a bit more interesting sounding and a bit more timelessy sounding as well. So one thing that happened was I had Mike from Rogue Planet master this song. The version we're listening to now is the unmastered version. So he does tend to make things really, really loud. I remember when I got it back, when I'd pull it into something, it was actually clipping the output. I've seen him argue before that doesn't matter. Like, if it sounds good, it sounds good. But when you look at Spotify's algorithm and YouTube's algorithm and stuff like that, they say to make sure you leave like a dB at least of headroom. Otherwise, anything that's up there kind of gets bit crushed or ruined. And it's kind of subtle, but I would rather take what they're telling me and give my song the greatest chance of actually sounding good. So when I got it back, I ended up pulling it into Pro Tools, the master file, and just pulling it down a dB so that wouldn't happen. But there was also, because I think he'd carved out a bit of the low mid area. When the drums first come in the softer part, in this section here, the drums in the master file just sounded a bit too scooped, and it didn't really suit that section just because of the overall processing he'd done. So what I ended up doing was, in the master file, I cut that section out of the song, and I just remixed that section with a new different drum tone, and then bounced that section out of the song, and then pulled it into the master file and stitched it back in with crossfades. So when you're listening to the finished version of Castle, there's two different mixes in there. There's one that's mastered by Mike, which is the majority of the song, but the start of the song is my master, which I'd stitched in afterwards, which is something I often do because I can't leave well enough alone. So for this version here, what I've done is I just pulled in that drum mix that I did from the other session. I've just pulled it in as a stem, so you can hear. I keep doing that because that's what you do with Reaper. All right. So this is the different drum mix. Actually, what I'll do is I'll play this bounce drum mix for the verse, and then I will let it go into the chorus where the original drum mix comes in. They're just a little bit different. How do you do? Is it that here? Yeah, right. So you can hear that those two drum tones are actually quite different, and I probably like the later one that I did to stitch in to the intro, just because I'd had a bit of time to learn what I didn't like about the other one. But this was just a quick drum mix. I think I did it probably in 10 minutes, stitched it back in, and I liked it a lot. So another thing about this drum recording was I had the drums set up in a kitchen, but I didn't want to bring my computer and everything up from my bedroom. So I had the cables go all the way from the kitchen into my bedroom, and it was just recording with my computer in the bedroom. So I'd have to run down to my bedroom, press record, run up to the drum kit, and do a take, which meant like I'm not going to be doing part by part. I'm just going to be doing full takes because I can't be running back and forth. Which is why, some of the parts from chorus to chorus are a bit different, a bit improv-y, because I was just thinking on the fly and playing on the fly. And the other thing was I just bought these hardware EQs, like the API that I mentioned, and I really wanted to use the hardware on the way in, but because the computer and the hardware was so far away, I couldn't keep going back and forth to make those adjustments. So I just recorded everything into the computer completely dry. There was no processing or anything. And then on the mix, I used only plugins, whereas the other songs on this record, I did use a lot of hardware, but this mix actually just still sounds a lot better, even though that it's all plugins. So I don't know if hardware does as much as some people think it does. Like, it's fun to play with and all that kind of stuff, but it's not completely necessary, I don't think. Okay. So there is one interesting thing about this drum recording here. You see this channel called Trigger, and I learnt this trick off Daniel Bergstrand, who recorded like the Soil Work and the In Flame stuff. So you get a D drum trigger that people typically use to put on a drum and then send to a sampler to make a drum sample. There's no drum samples whatsoever on this recording, but that trigger actually has a stick-on transducer microphone in it to send the signal. So all it's picking up is just like this click sound of impact because it's stuck against the head of the drum. But he actually uses that sound to blend in with the snare or the kick, just to give it an extra snap, because it's a really snappy, it's not a nice sound, but it's just all attack. And it kind of sounds like you're compressing the snare drum a lot. Like if you blend it in with the snare top mic, it just sounds like the snare top is compressed and it's like that pop comes through. So if you blend that in, it actually sounds really cool. I will show you what the trigger sounds like on its own. Hilarious, right? It sounds bad. It's just like on the rim of the drum. You can hear a little bit of the bleed of the cymbals in there, like not much. I've got it gated for whatever reason. But it just sounds, it makes the rim shots sound more rim shotty because it's that really rimmy sound. I've got this time adjuster on it. I've moved it 10 samples forwards because a transducer will pick up the signal before a microphone will, because it's closer and it's just an instant click. Just adjusted at 10 samples so that it kind of hits at the same time as the snare top, the snare microphone. That's all that's doing. I cut out all the low end. Which I actually don't mind that low rumble there, but I kind of just wanted to use it for that clicky stuff up the top. I've got a limiter on it, just to catch the really loud ones, because it tends to be really inconsistent, as you can see. It moves around a lot more than a snare mic would. And then that's just me setting the level. And then that EQ is doing nothing. So let's listen to the snare top by itself, and then I will turn on the snare trigger as well. The snare top. I really like that snare sound. So I'm going to play it again now, and then I'll turn the trigger on. So I don't know if you could hear that, but it just adds a bit more snap to it. So I'm going to loop a snare drum here. How do you loop on Pro Tools? I can't remember. I'll loop this snare drum and turn that trigger on and off so you can hear it. It makes a big difference. It's kind of awesome. I haven't done this since because I ended up selling the trigger because it was just another annoying thing to set up that I didn't think it was necessary. But I really like it on this. I'll turn it up and exaggerate it so you can hear it some more. That's great. I really like it. So that's what's happening. So now that we've done that, let's actually look at the snare top mic. So it's gated a bit. I didn't want to gate this all the way so that there was no bleed. I actually wanted the bleed because the song's such a simple thing that the bleed kind of sounded nice, and the kitchen was actually, it had a nice ambient sound to it for the drums. And there, because of the tempo, there's a part in the bridge where I'm just riding on the crash, and I wanted that crash sound to be a bit more mono, so you could hear the crash bursting through in the center a bit more, so I could have the guitars on the left and right really loud and the drums more mono. So this is the snare top mic. So yeah, a lot of bleed in it, but it sounds great. That's my Black Beauty snare before I put die-cast hoops on it. So those are the triple flange hoops, and it's got a nice resonance to it, and it's actually in tune with the song. I'll save up my heart. So it's like a G sharp, I suppose. Yeah, so I could have it more resonant but still fit in with the song really well there. So this is that API EQ, which I wanted to use the hardware version of, so I just used the plugin version. Boosting a bunch of 12.5K and a bunch of 2.5K as a shelf. So I'll turn that off and on. So yeah, that makes a huge difference. I might actually turn all the processing off the snare. So that's how it came in, which is still pretty good. I think we're hearing a bit of processing off of the snare bus. Well, maybe not. Okay, so that's how it came in. I was doing this tape machine thing a lot at the time. Just makes it sound a bit closer and a little bit brighter. It's just like a little cheat I do to make stuff sound a bit brighter. And then here's a lot of EQ going on here, so I'll turn this off and on. And the main thing you will hear is me manufacturing this low punch here. If I turn it off, it'll be very thin sounding. Yeah, so that makes it a lot thicker. So with snare drums, I'll always have a look at the spectrum analyzer and see where the low fundamental of the snare actually is. I know a lot of people will just boost a 200 hertz bell, and that would have actually worked for this snare drum because of the tuning. But a lot of the time, you know, if you've got a low tuned snare, the low end could be all the way down here, or if your snare's tuned higher, it could be all the way up there. So you're not exclusively, if you're doing like just a wide bell thing, you're not exclusively just boosting the area that you want to boost. So I'll always make sure I look at what I'm doing here. So you'll see this is right in the area. of that low punch, and it's just a narrow bell, so I'm just pulling that up. These are just some resonance I was pulling out. Like I said, I tuned the snare to the key of the song, and I wanted that note to be prominent, but I didn't want any other overtones that were out of tune to come through, so I pulled them out, which I probably wouldn't do now. I would just leave them in because I think those overtones actually sound pretty nice. I'll take them off and you'll hear the difference. So it just makes it sound slightly drier and a bit tighter with them on, but it's not a big enough difference to go through and do that. I wouldn't do that now. And I believe this is probably actually the note, where the note is coming through, the G sharp, and I'm probably just trying to accentuate that. Let's have a listen. Yeah, it is. It's a higher octave of that G sharp, and I'm just trying to pull that up, and then just a bit more bite there. And there was probably just a bit too much snare bottom rattle there that I've pulled out. Okay, and then we've got this VMR, and okay, doing this virtual channel thing. Seems to be a common theme on this mix, just trying to get a lot of harmonic color to stuff, and then a distressor on 6:1, compressing it a bit just to give it that nice squishy punchy sound. So it's just doing a little bit, but I love that distressor squish where it sounds like it's sucking the thing in it and just like spitting it back out really hard. I love that. Alright, and then just a bit more overall presence there, and then a limiter. At this time I seem to be really worried about stray peaks and kind of keeping everything in balance there, but it would have been fine without that. It's not a huge deal there. Alright, and then on the snare bass, there's nothing going on the snare bass, just another limiter. And it's not actually catching it and limiting it all the time, it's just stopping the stray peaks. Alright, now a huge part of this drum sound was this ribbon mic, which was just like a room mic just in front of the kit. Alright, so this ribbon mic is a huge part of the drum sound. It gives it that nice overall kit sound that glues everything together and just has that cool ambience. So yeah, I wanted all that crash in there just to pull the crash a bit more into the center so the overheads didn't sound unnaturally wide. That's pretty much what I'll always use a mono room mic for, is just kind of pulling everything back into the center, because that sounds a bit nicer to me, and you can have the guitars up a bit louder. Alright, so let's see what we got going on. A little bit of this top end here, and bit harmonics there. We'll turn that off. Just a little bit of brightening there, and then yeah, this is where the main EQ is happening. So I didn't want any kick drum in this microphone because the kick is hard to get in phase in this microphone with all the other like 40 kick mics I have going on. So I just completely got rid of it, and depending on where you move this here, the phasing with the snare will be different. So I'll actually have the snare top playing, and I'll move this around and flip the polarity until it sounds really in tune and really punchy with the snare mic, and it ended up being there that it sounded really good against the snare top mic. And then that's just me boosting that G sharp again. Just accentuating the tune the resonance of that snare drum, pulling it out some other resonances. I would say those would be cymbals there. Yeah, they're nasty resonances when the crash hits. And some overall brightening, and then just chopping the super high end off. I think the hi-hats can get a bit wild up there in a ribbon mic sometimes, so I've just pulled that off. And then just another high shelf. I think that's just for when... Yeah, that's just for the bridge to get some more crash. Yeah, it's not on in the choruses. So that's the ribbon mic. Alright, and then there's a snare expander mic, which I'm trying to think what this would be. I think this is just a really cheap condenser, a mono condenser, you know, in the middle of the room, pretty far away from the kit, and it would just be, I don't know if it's just gated to open when the snare hits or what. No, it's just turned on all the time. So that's that, and I talked about it in the last video, that mid-range puh sound I always want. That's what this mic is trying to do, and to pull the ambience of the drums back in the center. I just like that mono ambience on drums. Sounds pretty cool. Yeah, the snare sounds cool and powerful on that mic. So just pulling out a couple of resonances there. I don't know if that... No, that doesn't come on later. And then that's the puh there, that's 700 hertz. Sounds completely boring with it off, it just sounds like a dead snare. With it on, it sounds awesome. I'll actually play that with the snare drum, snare top, so you can hear the difference it makes. Yeah, it just puts it in a room, and because it's mono, it's kind of like, it's not distracting or anything, it kind of just sounds like it's a part of the snare top mic. Cool. And then it's got this EQ, so just making sure no low kicks coming through it, or, you know, all the cool ambience from the snare drum is in this area. I didn't really need the crashes coming through it. I don't think the crashes would sound very good in this mic because it's a cheap condenser. Alright, and then there's these ambient mics, stereo mics, and they were down the hallway going off the kitchen. Another thing I'll always do is just putting drum mics really far away from the kit to act as reverb. And I don't know if these are just gated to open when the snare hits or what's going on, but we'll find out. Yeah, they're gated just to open when the snare hits. So it's similar sound to that snare expander, that mono one. Same thing, it's just further away, so when you put them together, it's just like an extra long reverb. And we'll turn the snare top on again, and you can hear those two mics going on. Yeah, they do a lot. And those were just Rode mics, just cheap Rode condensers, and wow, a lot of EQ. Yeah, I think the hallway that it was in was like very narrow, so there must have just been a lot of weird resonances happening. Let's see what happens if I turn that off. Yeah, it's just a bit honky with all that stuff on. It probably didn't need that much. That's a bit wild, but once you start, I guess you can't stop. And then that would be for the crash cymbals, just when it's opening and I'm playing on a crash. I don't want that harsh crash to come through and kind of be distracting when the snare hits, because it's only opening when the snare hits. So those are the ambient mics, and they are both bussed into this amb mics channel, which is where the gate is happening there. I'm boosting another 12 dB of that 700 Hertz right there, so we'll turn that on off. But that's my sound right there. It's just that mid-range in the snare. Boosting some more of it there, cutting out some cymbals. Cool. Alright, and then the drum rooms were KM184 Neumann mics, just pointed towards the back walls, probably like 12 feet away from the kit, facing away from the kit. They sound like this. Like best drum room mics I've ever had, and it's recorded in a kitchen. So for whatever reason, that kitchen rips. And see, let's see what's going on with it. Yep, that's that. Just getting some more harmonics. That doesn't really do anything. If I turn it off and on, you won't hear anything. This tape. Again, doesn't do a lot, just helps with some harmonic stuff and pulling it a bit closer. Okay, boosting a lot of low end. I wanted a lot of low end in these rooms, it looks like. Yeah, so that's kind of that area that's coming through those ambient snare mics. I didn't want it so much in these closer rooms. I just wanted the closer rooms to be a bit more chunky and full. Kind of helps separate them from those other room mics, because there's so many room mics going on. They've all got to have a distinct sort of purpose, I suppose. Cool. Nothing really interesting going on there. Alright. So now let's look at the overheads. So I can tell I haven't done much processing to those overheads, which is strange for me, but it sounds good, sounds nice and splashy. Those would be the C414 AKG mics, just hovering above the kit. I kind of just, with those mics, I kind of just slap them up there wherever, because they're such large diaphragm, you know, whatever's going to happen is kind of going to happen in those mics anyway. So there's the hat side and the ride side. So the hat side, that's the processing, just notching out some cymbal stuff. And then the ride side is probably the same. Except it didn't need that thing. That must just be happening in the hi-hat, whereas this one's not picking up that much hi-hat there, so it didn't need it. I guess I'll turn those on and off so you can hear. Just tidies them up a bit. And they're filtered so that there's no low end in them. Again, when I have the cymbal mics, I just want to be able to pull that channel up and just get more cymbals or less cymbals. I don't want to be like, I need more cymbals, but when I pull the mic up, the kick doesn't sound as good. Like, these are just for cymbals. So they're being bussed here, and I'm doing some more processing. So that's where I'm pulling out all the low end and a bit more of that goofy sounding sound that you don't need in cymbals. I'll try and show you that. Yeah, I didn't really need that, so I pulled that out there. That must be a bad resonance in the snare drum. Got this tape that I put on everything. I pretty much put tape on every channel. Yeah, just kind of boosting the overheads up in this area, this 12K area, just to kind of fill out the spectrum. If your cymbals are kind of, the high end's based around this 5K area, there's a lot of build up there because, you know, the guitar amps have a lot of that area, and that's kind of where your mix is going to sound focused, and you don't really want that. So, or I don't really want that. So I'll kind of try and focus my cymbals up higher so my guitars can have plenty of this, and everything else can have plenty of that, my vocals or whatever, and then my cymbals kind of just sit up here, and it kind of just balances out the spectrum, because there's not a lot of instruments that have heaps of stuff going on up here, so I want most of the information in the cymbals to be up there. And that EQ is doing nothing, and then that's just for me to set the level of the overheads. Alright, let's have a look at the kick drum. So there's a lot of sources for the kick drum here. There's this D12 mic, which is like a vintage AKG mic from the 50s. I think it's like a box looking mic. And the low end in it isn't great, but it's got a really cool character in the mid-range. So it's, as I've been talking, it's a common theme with me is like, instead of going for something that's overall pretty good, I'll grab something, or I'll go for a tone where a particular part of it is really good, and I'll kind of carve everything else away and use that particular part that's really good, and then make up the rest of the sound with a different source. So with this D12, I've pulled all of the low end out, and it's just a high end sort of knocky sound. It sounds like this. And that's just a mic out in front of the head. It's not inside the head. It's just sitting out the front of my 26-inch kick, just to try and get that knocky, less clicky sound. And that's where I'm pulling all the low end out of it. And then we've got this harmonics, and then some tape. Makes it a bit brighter. But then, yeah, this is where all the stuff's happening. So there's some funny stuff going on in this mic. There's a few areas where there's just these massive valleys, these dips in the frequencies. And because it's old, there's probably something going on with it that's not right. So I'll always have to kind of do that in that area. No matter what the source is, that is kind of just always pulled down. And when you boost it back up, it doesn't sound bad. It sounds good. It's just kind of not there. And yeah, there must have been a lot of bad resonances in this kick sound. So I'll turn this EQ on and off so you can hear what's going on. Yeah, it sounds a lot nicer on. You're kind of hearing a lot of those bouncy overtones when I turn these off. And a lot of cool kick drum sounds do have those bouncy overtones in them, like a lot of Eric Valentine's stuff does. But for this, I didn't want that. I just wanted something a bit more solid sounding. So I've pulled that out and then kind of overall just sculpted that area the way I wanted it to sound. And then this is just me pulling out a bunch of 200 hertz. I'll show you that on and off. Yeah, I just didn't really need that in this channel. And then that is just doing that again after all the processing. You know, it brings that, starts bringing that up again. I just want to make sure it wasn't there. And then just another resonance. And then so there's more brightness happening on the kick bus afterwards. So on the kick, alright, we'll get to that in a bit, but first we'll look at these sub kicks, which are just NS10 speakers, one in the box and one out of the box, and you just, it's easy to do, you can do it with any speaker, you just reverse the wiring on them, and instead of being speakers, they become microphones. But then you need some kind of pad to plug it into before you go into your preamp, because they're really, really sensitive and really loud. So the sub kick that's in a box, I've written here, I think this is the first recording where I used these actually, is focus more around that 100 hertz, the 80 to 100 hertz area, really punchy, and that sounds like this. It's a great punchy low in there, and I've really sculpted it. This is something I don't do anymore. I kind of just leave them be a little bit more, but I knew that I wanted this kick drum focused in a certain area, and I just sculpted around it to make that happen. And I've pulled this sub out here because the sub's coming from this other channel, and I think I had the sub out of the box actually a lot further away than the one in the box. So if this one was coming in there and then the sub one was happening later, they kind of sounded out of time. So I just wanted to pull all the sub out of this one and just have it that more knocky low end. So you can tell it's really focused around this area, this 90 hertz. And just this virtual channel thing on there again. And then this is the sub kick out of the box. This is what this one sounds like. So just all sub, together they sound like this. So you really need both of them together to make up the full sound. But what's going on with this one is the opposite of the other one. So I'm just pulling out all this like 70, 80, 100 area and just boosting this 40 hertz area. So it's really just focused there. So it's kind of like this one in the box is octave up and this one out of the box is octave down. And then just that thing. And then they're summed together to this kick, to this kick bus channel. And so let's turn all the kick mics on there. So this kick bus channel, I'm just boosting some top end there. Some tape machine. This distressor, it's probably only doing around 3 dB. That same setting as the snare where it's like 6:1. Hey buddy. And that might be something that is automated on in some parts. We've got a limiter to hold it in place. I'm just trying to catch those stray peaks. This is the level, and that's just a little notch there, and that is that's all the kick close mics. And then there's this one kick expander mic, which was some kind of mic, maybe like a 57 out the front of the kick, just gated to come on when the kick hits. So it's just a bit of mono ambience to the kick drum with the other kick sources. It sounds like this. So that makes a pretty big difference. That's all the kick sources there. So I think we've gone over everything except for the toms. Oh, and this kick snare mic, which is placed underneath the snare drum but facing the beater of the kick. So this is the first time I ever recorded one of these kick snare mics. You can see I've wrote cool but scary. So it's muted throughout the choruses and it only comes on in this bridge because I wanted the kick to sound a bit more aggressive in this bridge. So it's kind of like there's no snare bottom in this. So this acts as a snare bottom and just a knocky thing to the kick. And by itself, it sounds like this. So it's a pretty cool sound. I probably should have had it on the whole time, but I'm just pulling all the low end out of it. I'll show you what the low end sounds like in this mic. So there's a lot of it there. It just didn't play nice with the other mics with phasing. So there's not much EQ. I've flipped the phase to get it to sound right against that D12 mic. It's very compressed. Just sounds a bit squishier with that compression. And then just some shaping. you hear that there. And there is that cool knock. I really should have used this. So if we solo the kick, so yeah, that makes a huge difference in that bridge there. Really should have had it on the whole time because it sounds cool. And there's no snare bottom, so I should have had it on just for the sake of having a snare bottom. Alright, so the bussing here, this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So, at the time what I was doing was having a drum bus that goes through distresses. So all the drums are summed and then go into this bus that's compressed quite heavily by distresses. And then there's another version of the drum bus, and then there's this dry bus here, which isn't actually dry in this case. It's still got this compressor on it. But all I use this for is because this distressor bus, all the drums are getting compressed together so hard. If you try and turn up, say, the snare, it doesn't really get any louder. It just kind of gets more compressed. So I have this extra bus that I can just send, like I'll send just the snare through it, an auxiliary of it through this, so I can turn the snare up a bit more if I need to for some parts. So everything is going through this, but then I'll aux send the snare or the kick to this if I need it louder in some parts. And then there is one more drum bus. So the same drum sum that gets sent to this distressor drum bus is getting sent to this Fairchild drum bus. And it's just a really compressed, it's just a parallel smash bus. Just a really quick, punchy drum sound. I don't know, I'll try and solo this bus so you can hear what's going on with it. So yeah, that's what the Fairchild drum bus sounds like. It's just, it's pretty quiet, it's low in the mix, but it's just adding some punch, and especially to the cymbals, it's adding like this punchy, attacky sound of the cymbals, which I really like. And a lot of people like that squashed, flattened cymbal sound that's really controlled. I like the cymbals to have like a lot of punch to them, so it's mainly for that. So let's have a look at the okay, and then all of those drum buses get summed here to the final drum sum, and that has nothing going on. It's just where everything's being summed to. So let's have a listen to all the drums, and I can turn this distresses on and off so you can hear how much the distresses are doing on the drum bus here. A big part of the sound is the distresses, because nothing is compressed individually really. When I turn it off, like, there's no glue and there's no punch to anything. Everything sounds quite flat and boring. So this is where all the excitement is coming from. It's on 6:1 and it's compressing it a fair bit. Not that much, 6 dB. Like, a lot of the times I'll have this distressor on the drum bus on 20:1 and have it compressing like, 14 dB. Actually, I'll show you that. It's not that drastically different. It's just a bit more punchy. So you can hear that's a cool sound too, but for whatever reason I just wanted to go a bit less aggressive on this one. I'll go back to how it was. Sounds a bit boring at 6:1 now, but that's what I did. Alright, so that is all the drums. So when the chorus comes in, this is really typical for me, or actually the bridge in this case, is to have these impact crashes, which is just a recording of two crashes being hit, and if they're not there when the chorus comes in, I'll show you. It doesn't have a big impact on the way in. And then there's this explosion called holy shit explosion, which happens. This one's a bit more obvious when this part comes in. You can kind of hear it go like, and that's another pretty common thing that I'll do, just to have parts have impact, not in a way that you're like, oh, that was a cool effect, but you just kind of feel like it got bigger. So let's hear this transition how it is with these impacts on. Now let's listen with these impacts off. So boring, right? Kind of ruins the part. You put these back on. Much better. So that's something I'll always do. Like, I'll always try and hit the crashes a lot harder on the downbeats of the chorus, but because it's so compressed in the drum bus, I'll always need to add some kind of impact like that as well. That just sounds like everyone's hitting a bit harder on the first hit of the chorus. Okay, that's everything with the drums now. Let's have a look at the bass. The bass sounds like this. So this is just the bass, again, this is just the bass sound from the demo. I thought once I was done the guitars and the vocals, I was going to go back and redo the bass, and I had this in there just for reference. And it ended up being good. There was no need for me to redo it. It has some cool like moments of me just jamming through there. I'll try and play it through here. So again, those parts are just me reacting to the song because it was part of the demo. I picked up the bass and I played the song through, and that's what came out. But in the demo, it wasn't edited like this. So once I decided to keep it, I did have to go through and edit the timing and stuff like that, because it's not the greatest performance of all time, but I liked it. So what's going on with the bass is I've done this, I'm a big fan of splitting up channels into two to have more control. So I've got this bass low, which just sounds like this. It's just the low end. Just sub, you only be able to hear that if you're on monitors or headphones or something. And then this Sans Amp plugin, which is one thing I miss about Pro Tools. You can't use this in Reaper. There's probably alternatives, but this is really good. So I think because this is just a subby low end thing. There you go, Taylor Larson low. I must have stole this setting off Taylor Larson. It just kind of moves the low end from a less subby area, maybe to like a 80 to 100 hertz area, and it makes it more compressed because of, it's emulating a Sans Amp, so there's a bit of drive and stuff on there. So rather than just using the DI, this is just compressing it a little bit for me and just moving the low end into a more area that would come out of an amp. And then, yeah, this is just where I roll off everything above 200 hertz so that it's all just sub. And then this C4 thing is Taylor Larson again. I must have just watched something on Taylor Larson. So it's just boosting that low end and compressing it at the same. But not compressing it, just compressing this mid-range. There's kind of no point to that, but it is just boosting that low end there. And then max bass. So this takes the low frequencies and adds a lot of harmonics so that you can kind of hear it on smaller speakers. So it's adding those harmonics up to the, the 250 to 300 area while keeping it sounding deep. I'll turn that on and off. You might not be able to hear it. Yeah, you can hear it just adds like a higher octave of the sound up there subtly with harmonics. And then L1, just to hold it in place, I pretty much always will have... Okay, so this is that Taylor Larson. So I must have just stole the whole channel strip off of a thing that Taylor Larson was doing and then just pulled it in as a preset or something like that. But yeah, I'll always do this L1 thing to pin the bass in position so the low end is consistent. And then yeah, this is definitely a Taylor Larson thing. I don't even really know what this plugin does, but it kind of like limits the sound from both ends, the top and the bottom, but pins it down some more. Yeah, it makes it sound more pinned sounding. And then, yeah, just rolling off the top again, because with all this processing and the limiting, it kind of brings all that top end back up. So I'm just making sure that it stays the hell out of the way there. And then this would just be... Okay, so I've gone through and automated each note with EQ to make sure each note is as loud as the next one and to kind of put the bass in its specific area so it can be really loud. I haven't done this for a while, but there you go. I thought this was a pretty simple bass sound. So that means I've done this throughout the whole song each time it plays it. So that's the C sharp there, that must be a B, and then that must be whatever the first note is. I must have done that throughout the whole song. Yeah, cool. And then we've got this bass high channel, which sounds like this. So it's not a very nice sound on its own, but it's necessary. So I've got this Ben Bruce guitar amp, pulling all the bass out and the mid, just boosting some treble, get rid of that presence, because that presence doesn't sound super good in bass. And then, okay, taking the top end off and just making it a bit more present in that mid-range there, and then sorting out some resonances. I know that this bass does have some like funny resonances in the mid-range. I'll show you. Yeah, those need to go. They don't even add any note or anything. They're just annoying sounding. And there's a VMR. It looks like I was kind of putting this Neve thing on everything just for an extra bit of vintage tone to it. And then... okay, just boosting like half a dB of 750 there for the bass. Turn that on and off so you can hear it. That's cool, just that bit of honky mid-range in there. That sounds more than 0.47 dB. I think this Neve EQ like does a bit more than it says it does. It's pretty aggressive. I haven't used that for a while either. And then just limiting it again. Alright, now both of those channels are summed to this bass bus, and all I'm doing is just pulling out a resonance there. And that resonance there seems to be automated. It must be bad in the choruses, but not the verse. So that is the bass. Alright. Lastly, let's look at the vocals here. So I did re-record the vocals after the demo version. I felt like I could do a better job. I could put a bit more emotion into it. And this song is a very emotional song, which is about one of my friends who passed away and experiencing going to his funeral and things like that. So I just kind of wanted to like channel that and put it into a big emotional sounding vocal recording that maybe wasn't so focused on being pitch perfect or sounding really good. It was kind of just meant to convey what I was saying. So I do all the main vocals, and then Gavin, who used to be in the band, came and did the vocal harmonies, which I had done in the demo, but I deleted them and wanted him to come and redo them because it was his friend that we lost as well. And I think the day he was coming to rock up to do it, I had sent him the demo, weeks before, and he hadn't listened to it. And he rocked up and listened to it on the way or something. I was like, wow, this song's actually pretty cool. Like, hadn't listened to it yet. And I was like, man, how you're recording vocals today? Sure enough, he was completely fine. Like, Gavin is an amazing singer. Tell him, I would show him the melody or the harmony I want him to sing once, record it a few times, and he would nail it. It'd be perfect. He kind of completely got the vibe immediately. In terms of processing on the vocals, there's nothing too interesting going on. Maybe we'll start at the most like intense vocal part of the song with the bridge. So this bridge part here, there is a main vocal, and then there is a double vocal, which is the same part but 10 dB quieter, a different take. And these left and right channels of the chorus are turned off here. Yeah. So in terms of my vocals, there is a main and a double through this part.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle that's big enough for you and me.
So the double is pretty subtle. I'll turn it off.
We can live that far forever.
I'll turn it back on.
And no one else will ever see.
Just gives it that more like traditional rock sort of sound, that chorusy, thick sort of sound. It's not a huge difference, but I had the extra take, so why not? In terms of processing, there's not much going on here. There's a lot of honky stuff going on. SM7B will do that. I'll show you that on and off.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle that's big enough for you and me.
Yeah, so there's just a bit too much energy down there, so I've just carved that out. Then I'm using this waves tune thing, which isn't doing much. It's just pulling the notes a bit more into tune. So I'll turn this waves tune on and off so you can hear kind of what it's doing. It's just a bit of a fail-safe, just to, if I'm a little bit out of tune, it will pull me back in, but it's not doing a whole lot, which is why I really like this waves tune. You can keep things really natural sounding. I'll make it inactive so you can hear what the vocals sounded like without it.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle that's big enough for you and me. We can live that far forever.
So it's just parts like that ver. If I have it back on, I'll make it active. You can hear it's just straightening that out a little bit.
We can live that far forever.
Yeah, just sorting that out a little bit. All right, so now to the fun stuff. Let's turn on Gavini's harmonies here so you can hear some cool stuff going on.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle. We can live
Yeah, that last part in particular is really cool. So he's got 3 channels of harmonies there. A left and a right doing this main harmony.
And no one else will ever see.
He's got a great voice. Just the same processing as I had on my vocals. Then there's soothe, just catching any nasally sounding stuff in my voice.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
Kind of a lifesaver, like if I turn it off you'll hear all these resonance.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
Especially if I'm sort of screaming a bit more.
We can live that far forever.
You hear that bit with this on.
We can live that far forever.
Just a bit more pleasing to listen.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
And then I'm just pulling out some 240 there, just some mighty low end.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
Just kind of stuff that wasn't adding anything to the vocal.
That's big enough for you and me.
Sounds a bit more done. Okay. And this de-esser clearly isn't working right now, but it's that thing that comes with the slate one. So there's been no de-essing on any of these vocals you've heard so far, which is unfortunate. But you know what a de-esser does. And then we've got this tape machine, which is huge for vocals.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
Sounds so boring with it off.
That's big enough for you and me.
Just makes it sound better. I don't know exactly what it's doing, but it's just better. So these vocals were compressed on the way in, which I forgot to mention, with my hairball 1176. It was like 20-1, and it was just pinned on the high notes, like really heavy compression. And in the mix, I still needed to compress some more. Vocals just need to be really compressed. So I've got this really quick attack on this Fairchild plugin here. It's not doing a lot. It'll be doing about 3 dB.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
You won't really hear what it's doing, but I'm just compressing it a little bit, just catching some of the stuff with a really quick attack. Another de-esser. This one will work. Sometimes I have to de-ess vocals more than once to catch all the S's.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle.
It's not doing heaps, but just catching a little bit more there, and then that EQ is doing nothing. Alright, and then all those vocals are summed to this Vox bus here, and there's just a little more processing going on, so I'm just kind of doing like this tilt, like if you've ever used a tilt EQ, I'm just like pulling the low end out and kind of like putting a bit more energy into that 1K and up area. Okay, this is where all the brightening, I was wondering where that was coming from. So all the brightening is practically coming from that EQ there. Like, I'll solo my vocals in the chorus. So in the chorus I have a main, a double, and a left and a right.
I wish I could say what I need to say. Instead, I'm half the world away. And even when I'm in the same room.
So yeah, that's where all the brightness and stuff's coming from. A bit more 1K to help it pop through those really mid-rangey guitars. 1.5K for a bit of bite and aggressiveness to it, and yeah, just some nice top end. And then they're being compressed, all the vocals are being compressed in this bus right here. There's 2-1, a pretty fast attack there, a fast release, and it's probably not doing much.
I wish I could say what I need to say.
So just gluing all the vocals together a little bit. Just me making sure that no low-end rumble is coming through after all that processing. And then a final de-esser on the bus.
I wish I could say what I need to say.
Just to catch. No, I hate S's. I don't want the S's. You hear me? Alright, and then there is... we'll listen to some more harmonies here for some fun.
I wish I could say what I need to say. Instead, I'm half the world away. And even when I'm in the same room, I couldn't be further from you.
So in that chorus section there, a left and a right vocal comes in to help it sound bigger.
Finding something that I can trust. I've said enough. I wish I could say what I need to say.
So that part generally gets wider and starts building. And then there's this R, which actually just come from the demo. I just did this quickly, like I was holding a mic and just did this. And I think what's giving it that sound is, yeah, it's just a normal vocal, but it's got a bunch of chorus on it and a bunch of delay and a bunch of reverb. So and you can actually hear the bleed of the speakers playing the song back, because like I said, I just did it in front of the speakers and just kept this from the demo because it is what it is. Like, no point of redoing that. It sounds good. And that's everything besides this last part. There is one more guitar tone, and it's just another amp sim. It was another thing I was going to redo with a guitar with a room mic, because it's a really roomy sounding guitar. But the one from the demo just sounded good.
That's big enough for you and me.
And you can hear it's not played perfectly. It's a little bit all over the place, but that part should sound a little bit more live anyway. I kind of wanted my voice... I did this part vocally. I did this after everything else. I wanted it to sound like I'd been through this big experience, and you know, I really am screaming my guts out throughout this song. Like, if you listen to this last chorus here, I'm going pretty hard.
I wish I could say what I need to say. Instead, I'm half the world away. And even when I'm in the same room, I couldn't be further from you.
So my voice is shot after that. It's noticeably raspy, but that's kind of the sound I wanted there. It's honest.
I'll save up my herd and build a castle that's big enough for you and me. We can live there for forever, and no one else will ever see.
And it's not perfect, but I didn't want to do this part over and over again and make it perfect, because this whole song is kind of meant to be therapeutic for me about, you know, processing losing a friend. And if I overanalyze things, and you know, that kind of defeats the purpose. So it's emotional, it's a bit sloppy, it's all over the place. A lot of this song, like I said, that one of those guitars, the bass, just came from the demo session because I didn't want to have to do it again, and I was happy with the way that I did it originally in the demo when I was initially reacting to the song. And, you know, this is the best sounding song and the most well received song on the EP, and it's the simplest production wise. There's not a hell of a lot going on. You know, it's just a simple drum sound, it's a simple guitar sound, it's like not many virtual instruments or anything like that. The vocal production is very, very simple. And like I said, I did 3 or 4 mixes before I was done, and I was really happy with it. Besides the little mishap of me doing my own master for the first verse and, splicing in my own verse afterwards. So that's everything. That's the whole song. So I encourage you to go listen to our EP. I know I kind of talked down the other songs because I had such a hard time with them, but I did spend a lot of time on this whole EP. The writing, the recording. Like I said, I hired studios, rooms in Melbourne to go record the drums for them and stuff like that. I know I said this one was all done in the kitchen and in my bedroom, but that's not the case for the other ones. I appreciate the listens. I'd appreciate some feedback too, if you want to give me some feedback. I just want to share my music with people, and I do this because I enjoy doing it. It's not like I want to become super famous or make money off it, but I do want to share it with people, and which is part of why I'm doing this stuff, because I want to show people the journey that happens with my music. So there you go. I'm going to play the whole song through and we'll have a listen to it. And thanks for sticking around. If you stuck around the whole way, I really appreciate it. And I'm Sounds Goodman, and this is Castle by Admella.
I used to come here every day. The sticks and leaves, they fall away. Anyway, it's been so long since I've had enough. Finding something that I can trust. I've said enough. I wish I could say what I need to say. Instead, I'm half the world away. And even when I'm in the same room, I couldn't be further from you. Sat with a ticking clock. Every second is a moment lost. Oh, I think too much. If you're listening and you thought this song's about you, then it's not. I said too much. I wish I could say what I need to say. Up my herd and build a castle that's big enough for you and